right. Hello. Once again, welcome back to the weekly podcast. Of course, this is Rochel T. I am Slizwack from Go Here Smoke This. And to this week on our weekly podcast, we're going to be talking about two things that you've probably used. Uh, they're probably two of the best online tools that you can use for this, and we're going to compare Leafly to Weedmaps. Um, Depending on where you live, if you live in a legal state, you've probably heard of one or the other of these, and we just want to do a quick comparison based on our experience. Now, I want to preface this with your mileage may vary, and what I mean is. Uh, Depending on what service you use, you may have a better coverage. And what I
Mm,
mean is, if I live in Oregon and I live in a rural part of Oregon, the Weed Maps doesn't really cover our area.
mm.
So I base my experience on Weed Maps in California.
Right, right.
So yeah, and it's they are the two things that are probably the easiest way to find a legal dispensary in your area, get directions to it, and know
Mm.
what time they open and close. They're basically like Yelp for marijuana dispensaries and delivery services.
Yeah, I would say like comparing them to Yelp is a good one, but I think that there's also like more that they delve into. And like one of the
Absolutely.
reasons why I use Weed Maps or Leafly is to actually look up information on weed.
Absolutely.
Like if I hear a strain I haven't heard before, the first thing I'm doing is Googling it. And you typically that's coming up either Weed Maps or Leafly.
Oh,
Is it leaf?
absolutely.
My question is it Leafly or Leaf Fly?
Leafly.
It makes sense, but I'm just like, you could like change it up. You could pronounce it
Yes.
wrong. You know what I mean? It's like one of those like Hermione or Hermione, or whatever people were saying for Hermione in
Oh,
the Harry Potter books.
my favorite is schedule and schedule.
Butterscotch or no, it wasn't butterscotch. There's another one that people say a caramel. People say
Oh,
caramel or caramel. The wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable.
yeah, exactly. And I think when people do that, they remind me of the person. You ever had that annoying person in high school that for a time always talked with a British accent?
No.
It's
I had
just,
people drop into it, but not perpetually
yeah,
British.
it's like,
People got obsessed with Britain at one point or another during school, and they thought
yeah,
that like being British was like bougie, and that was like the ultimate. There's definitely people out there like that. I think you're talking about those people, just like
yeah.
the needing to be correct for no reason, or needing to be worldly or pure worldly for no. It was just being extra, is what it was.
It's
It was
like,
just being
it's
extra.
like, well, I have, before we get started, I have a question for you. I
Yeah.
know they just recently legalized in your area.
Yeah.
So, how has Weed Maps or Leafly helped you now that dispensaries are just opening in your area?
So it's dispensaries haven't just been opening in our area. For
Okay.
legalization, the it's been medicinal for quite some time now.
Okay.
So Montana is one of the premier like primary states that started out with at least medicinal approval, and I think that's because Montana has a high vet population. Like
Okay.
there's a lot of like mental health awareness, PTSD stuff that's out here, and between the older generation and the kind of like cowboy attitude, medicinal was approved pretty early on. So what was
Yeah.
legalized recently in Montana is recreational use, and that's
Okay.
adult recreational use. So that's what recently passed. Adult recreational sales became available at the first of this year. So that's for anyone. Interestingly enough, it's not across the board. It's very selective. The
Really?
state approved legalization for recreational sales and recreational purchases, but they allowed individual counties to reject that if they want to. So when you do go shop recreational, you actually have to look and see if it's legal in counties. And you
Okay.
have to actually look for a sign that says open for recreational use. So
Okay.
while Weedmaps is helpful locating dispensaries, it is not helpful in differentiating those actual like nuances, which I find really
Okay.
interesting.
Okay.
Um, it's something that I'm not sure how they would be able to address that, like, put up a blurb medicinal only or recreational and medicinal. And I don't know that there's a lot of states that have the same issue where per county it's going to be a little bit different.
I
Um,
think
Great in identifying all of the existing ones. There's been a ton of new ones popping up and they're not showing up on there yet. I feel like it's kind of like
absolutely.
Google, getting updated. But yeah, that's the interesting part is they don't have a distinction on whether it's recreational. You really do have to like call individually to the dispensaries right now.
Now, I don't know about Leafly, but I have been on the owner operator side of Weedmaps, and
Interesting.
I will tell you that you don't get on. You have to pay to be on Weedmaps,
Okay.
and don't be fooled because I can pay more money to be at the top of the list in my county for Weedmaps.
Ooh, okay.
Whereas, so I can be in the number one, I can be the number one dispensary in my area. All I
Mm-hmm.
got to do is pay a little more advertising money to get that number one spot.
That's kind of.
So,
I mean, it's not based on reviews, though, right? Like they're not bumping you based on
absolutely,
reviews. They're not beefing
absolutely
reviews.
not.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
It's just whose name pops up first.
Exactly, exactly.
That's.
And that's,
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those things where it's a hidden behind the scenes thing
Mm-hmm.
where I wouldn't know that because when Weed Maps first started out, we actually were using Weed Maps for our dispensary that we ran.
Mm-hmm.
The cost of Weed Maps when we first started, this has been a few years ago,
Mm-hmm.
was $400 a month to advertise on Weed Maps. Okay.
That's. It's not terrible, but it's not great either.
Oh, listen to this. When we sold our last dispensary
Mm.
in, I believe, 2009.
Okay.
Okay. No, no, I'm sorry. The delivery service we got rid of in, no, excuse me, the dispensary in the cigarette store we got rid of in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
To be at the number one spot on Weed Maps, it was $2,200 a month.
Ooh, that's dirty.
Well, no, I can't say it's dirty. It's not the recommended uh, procedure simply because. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not banging on Weed Maps, not at
Mm.
all. I'm not hammering them because they have a unique product. There's only two of them that are nationwide.
Right. Or at least
So
a majority accept or a majority spread across states.
exactly, but the money that the return for being number one on Weed Maps is I'll grab an extra 10 or 15K a month being in that number one spot on Weed Maps. So I can't knock them for doing it because they're offering a service. They're not saying okay, it may work or it may not. But in my experience, because I paid for the number one slot on Weed Maps when we first started, the number one slot was like $800.
Right.
But because the demand was so great,
Mm.
and at that time they don't do it anymore, but because California is the same way as Montana, it's by county. So they
Okay.
would also let you know if you had dispensaries or delivery services in each county. They stopped doing that because they changed so much.
Mm.
But they would let you know, and that's probably one of the reasons why they stopped is because at least in California, every time they have a board of supervisors meeting, they can vote them in or out based on what's happening. And in California, about
All
every
right.
24 months, they'd be like, "You're shut down," and it's hard for them to keep up
Yeah.
with that with the opening and closing, freaking on a statewide, a nationwide basis, county by county.
I
But when
remember
they
you
were,
saying something about that where the SWAT team was coming in and all that crap like once a month.
because
Some bullshit.
yeah, well, I've been in a couple raids at our dispensaries, but we've always had good luck because we've always been 100% legal, which I recommend to everybody in the marijuana industry. It will
I don't
save you a lot of headache.
I don't think that's luck. I think that that's just being smart when you're in
Well,
being a good
exactly,
business owner. I think it's just
exactly,
being
exactly.
legal.
Because marijuana to me is something that helps the people, and the reason I was doing that because I wanted to help people. I
Mhm.
can't help people from jail. There
I
are
mean,
people out there that are in it for the money, but there are easier ways to make money. Um,
less hassle, less headache, less
exactly,
red
exactly.
tape now.
So for us it's all about the patient. So we just and like I said, we've been raided a couple times. It's kind of traumatic. You got people banging on your door, they're rushing in with guns, but realistically, they saw that they came in, they checked all of our paperwork, we showed them around, they said the DEA even said, hey, we can't really do anything because you guys are in compliance. A lot of
Mhm.
people get hemmed up because they're selling other things out the back door, or they're doing something illegal, whether it be, you
Online
know,
across state border sales.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. And, I wasn't always like, hey, let's all keep it legal, but I'm too old to go to jail. They don't have comfortable beds in there.
I think with legalization happening the way it is now, it's almost asinine to really like press the boundaries. Although, in all fairness, it is also a decent time to be getting caught because of all the legalization. So if you're
And
doing something wrong, there's a lot less likelihood that there's a higher likelihood that you're going to be paying a fine rather than going instantly to jail.
I'd like to take a second to freaking take my hat off to both Weedmaps and Leafly,
Mm,
because one of our goals is normalization.
hmm
Excuse me. And by them freaking being able to publish a nationwide directory of different dispensaries, it shows that it's coming to the forefront. It's getting more mainstream, and it's not as bad as people think it is. And I think when people see that you can go online and find out where the dispensary is, get directions to it, just like the old school map quest, go online, print out your map, run around with a piece of paper on the seat. And I think they've done huge things for the normalization of weed, and I'd like to give them a shout out.
Well, what's interesting is that when because of legalization as well, the need for websites like Leafly and Weedmaps, as the original intention was for directories. Now, because of legalization, you can Google that. So
Exactly,
the
exactly.
what I found really interesting is that Leafly, although designed to give information about dispensaries, about where to purchase, it seems like the main goal for Leafly is also like it's education first and then where to purchase and buy secondary. And I
Yes,
think that's why Leafly has grown and gotten so much reach because I feel like they did come after Weedmaps. I feel like
they
Weedmaps was the
did.
original. So, but Leafly decided to take a different approach to that. And I honestly feel like I use Leafly more than I use Weedmaps. Both are available in my state, thankfully, because it's like a Western, state.
Okay.
And with legalization, it just makes sense for them to be involved. And I think that, with the just all of the dispensaries and stuff that's been popping up, especially in the Western part of Montana, it just made sense for them to be involved in it. I think, it's the same reason to go to Colorado. Big things are happening there. It just makes sense. But Leafly is always where I feel like 9 times out of 10 that's where I end up for strain reviews.
Okay.
I feel like that's where I end up for strain information. Even hunting down a strain the other day that a buddy said he had, and I was like, yeah, that's supposed to be like some kind of myth. Like they actually do their research and hunt down all that information, which I love. But with Weed Maps, I feel like Weed Maps was designed more like user friendly when it came to looking for
Yes.
dispensaries and all of the information. But the caveat is that it's still, even though it's been around for so long, it still has like big gaps of missing
Yes.
information in its database.
Now, and see that. Let me give you a little background.
Mm.
Weedmaps and Leafly started at the same time,
Okay.
but they were different things. Weedmaps
Mm.
was just started as just simply a weed directory.
Okay.
Okay. When they started out in California, they started as simply a weed directory. There wasn't
Mm.
any strain information. There wasn't any sales information. It was like, okay, what area are you in? These are where the dispensaries are, and this is when they open and close.
Yep, I remember a worker coming in from LA and needing to find a dispensary, and he pulled up Weedmaps, and that was early days. I want to say like maybe 2009, and I know for a fact that Leafly or Weedmaps was started in 2008. So,
Now, Leafly, for
hmm
instance, started at the same time, but they started simply as a strain and information website. They
that
act
is how it's still built.
exactly, and I think Weedmaps is now adding that information
Hmm
because they do have dispensaries, they do have some strain information, but like you said, I feel like Weedmaps is more focused on location, hours, time, and the new thing that everybody's doing, well, they've been doing it for the last few years, is that they have what they have in stock, and
Oh,
it's
yeah.
it's bold of them to do that, Weedmaps and Leafly, because you're on a federal database if you start putting pictures of weed online. Back
Well,
when they started, back when they started out, when you start putting pictures of weed online, it was real taboo. Now it's no big deal. But I
yeah.
salute them for leading the charge. But Weed Maps, because they were the first one, and they basically had a monopoly for such a long time, I think they're playing catch up now because Leafly was actually providing more of a service as far as information, and all they had to do was add the location. Whereas Weed Maps was had the location, but they've got to catch up with all of that information. And don't get me wrong, they're doing a good job of catching up, and they're
hmm
starting to get there. But I believe Leafly has more info, and they are more of a resource than Weed Maps. Because, like you said,
Yeah.
if you're looking for strain info, and it's crazy because 9 times out of 10, if I'm looking for strain info, I go to Leafly.
hmm
But I know if I'm in a new town and I'm looking for a dispensary, Weed Maps will have the most up to date information.
And
And
that's
if
what's interesting is that because of where we're moving with legalization, it's almost like Weed Maps is becoming defunct in its only purpose. So it had to adjust to be able to still be relevant because now when people are looking up information for cannabis, it's not where, it's information how to grow, it's what are the laws in the state, it's, what's a good one for me, what's the difference between indica and sativa, it's all of
absolutely,
the actual like information, and it's looking up products, and Leafly has all of that because now it's a consumer, it's not just a locator, like it used to be
exactly.
where can I find it. Now it's, you don't have to know somebody, and that was what we maps covered, but the whole industry's changed now.
Most definitely, and I think now, like I said before, I like both of them, but they serve different purposes.
hmm
Um,
but
uh,
they are now trying almost merging into the same site because
exactly.
of the way that things have changed.
I think in the future, as we get more states legalized, as more states quote unquote get on board, I think eventually you're going to see either a bunch of different weed directories, if not weed phone books. And what I
Mm,
mean is little pamphlets that dispensaries are passing out that have a list of all the dispensaries, because you're seeing the birth now. Colorado's been seeing it for a while of weed tourism,
mhm,
because not all states are legal. You know what I'm saying? It's just like going to Hawaii. It's like I can do things in Hawaii that I can't do in Idaho, that I
mhm,
can't do in South Dakota. And so you're
mhm.
seeing weed tourism. And as you see weed tourism grow, Leafly and Weed Maps, they just keep on getting bigger. Hats off to them. And when I say bigger, I don't mean bigger in a corporate way, because I can tell you right now that I don't know if it's a requirement, but everybody at Weed Map smokes weed. Okay, call them up. Call up their business number. The person that answers the phone is going to be high, guaranteed. And that's not a knock, but it's a reinforcement because have you ever asked somebody about something and they didn't know it, or they didn't know about that thing, or hey, where can I get sushi? And they're like, oh, I don't eat sushi, so I don't know. A lot of times in the weed business, you get people that, unfortunately, for whatever reason, don't freaking ingest weed or marijuana, and it's kind of hard for them to give you uh,
A
their
good
viewpoint or
recommendation.
recommendation if they
Right.
don't do it. It's like, hey, I do stunt motorcycling. Do I want to ask some guy on the internet, or do I want to ask Evil Knievel? I'm going with Evil Knievel. But
Experience
it's
definitely matters.
exactly, and I find that, like I said, both, both businesses serve a purpose. I'm not saying it's not one thing is better than the other. It's one thing has more of a thing than the other. Weed
Hmm.
Maps has more locational information, and Leafly has more background information. And when I say background information, I mean, they have one of the favorite things that they have, a resource that most people use, like you were saying before, is they have a strain dictionary. It will tell you what stuff is good for. Can I find better strain directories? Yes. But I can't find better strain directories that will tell me where to go to get that strain.
That are
Weed
global,
maps,
that are nationwide. That's the problem
yes.
too, is being nationwide and beyond. I feel like I don't know. I don't think I've looked up anything for Canada, but I feel like Weed Maps and Leafly have branched out there as well. Hi,
Baby Baby
Poopy.
Ruth says hey to everybody.
Hi. Oh, she's so cute.
She's a cutie. She is the sweetest little dog.
Yeah. Oh.
Whenever she comes up to you, doesn't matter who it is, when you go like you're gonna pet her, she just goes limp and lays on her stomach, no bones.
Yes, love me.
Exactly. But I am a huge proponent of quality information being put out on the internet in about cannabis.
Without
And
having
we
to buy a handwritten guide that costs like $300.
Yes, and as legalization continues and progresses to more states, because I'm going to go out on a limb here. No states are shutting down marijuana now that they're seeing all this tax money rolling in. The first or second year that Colorado legalized marijuana,
Hmm.
they had enough excess in their state's coffers to pay each resident of Colorado $7.75.
That's nuts, man. Colorado
I
has a huge population.
I think that out of all the things, out of all the good things, out of all the help, the good that it can do, that made more states jump on board than anything else.
Oh yeah,
Um,
hard
I'm
numbers, especially when it comes
Yes,
to cash. Absolutely.
yeah. I'm not freaking knocking it, but and I appreciate it. I don't care the reason, but if that's got to be it, so be it. Because the proportion, the rate at which states are legalizing keeps on increasing.
Mm.
You look at the first states. Uh, California legalized back in 1996.
Yep.
9-6.
Yep.
Okay. And for almost a decade, people were pushing it, but no states were able to freaking get it done. But after that, 2006 to 2008, brrr, like dominoes.
Yep.
And I think one of the things that freaking pushed it along is the fact that Colorado was able to pay off all their state debt and have a state surplus.
Well,
Uh,
like Montana, we have crazy, ridiculous fire seasons that do millions of dollars of damage. They require millions of dollars in like funding. And I mean, it's not, it's the taxes are going to go where they should go. I guess to an extent, that's a sore spot for a lot of the owners here already,
Yeah.
where the actual tax money is going to be going to. But yeah, like just thinking about all of that surplus and what we could, because we regularly have to like purchase help from Canada firefighters because Canada is all
Yes.
kinds of forests. They know.
Yes.
But
And
yeah, that's a whole
I don't know.
other.
I don't know how you guys' fire season is, but if you've ever been in California, something's always burning.
Yeah, but every
And
every summer something's burning somewhere in the
and
state.
I think that with all the people that
Shut up,
are
Alexa! Nobody likes you.
yeah, I think with all the people that don't use marijuana, I think it's a good thing because, like you say, firefighting, feeding the homeless, freaking helping the disadvantaged. Marijuana is something that through tax money can contribute to that.
Right.
And like we're
Farming, getting back
yeah,
into hemp farming and all of the sustainability that comes with that, especially in wet states, like naturally wet states like Florida and Oregon and all the other places that get a buttload of rain. Like, come on, man. That's a
well, and
no-brainer.
and
Replacing the
now that
cotton industry.
now that those hard numbers are rolling in, people are like, "Oh, you mean I can make a little bit of money from that?" The politicians' ears are perking up, and you know what? If that's what it takes, that's what it takes. But all in all, it's well, we got to look at it like this. They're both of these companies are providing a service.
Hmm.
And depending, I think a lot of it depends on your level of experience with marijuana. And
Hmm.
I and for me, I say Weedmaps is for the experienced or mature user, a person that knows a lot about marijuana. They
Hmm.
know what indica and sativa are. They have an idea of what kind of strains they're looking for. But if you're new to marijuana, I would absolutely, and I've done this for decades to new people. I recommend that they go to Leafly,
Hmm.
even before they would show locations, because Leafly was an accurate compendium of strain information and what those strains help. Now,
Hmm.
don't get me wrong, marijuana is an individual thing. There's different people, different stuff for different people, but it
Different
will
strokes,
put
different
you
folks.
it will put you on the right track.
Mm.
It's like you got to make the appointment and go to the doctor for the doctor to prescribe you and say, let's try this, come back in 2 weeks, tell me how it does.
Right.
Leafly kind of does the same thing, and they narrow down from all the strains that you're hearing about, you're seeing on TV, people are talking about. They narrow it down so you can get some info on what could possibly help you. Because if the strain doesn't do what you need it to do, you're just smoking weed.
Hmm.
It's going to make you high in whatever fashion, but it may or may not help you because you're just like, let me try this, let me try that, and it. To be honest, it will save you money, which is another reason why I appreciate these two services. Is they show me the consumer where the deals are
Mm.
with the normalization and the legalization of marijuana, with the growing customer base. Want to get that deal, you can't have all the money all the time. And that, especially in this day and age where money is getting tighter every day, it helps to get, instead of spending a bunch of gas, driving around. And a lot of them, if you sign up for their little messaging service, they'll tell you when they have sales.
Yep.
And it's not a sign of being money grubbing to me. It's just another sign of normalization. Pizza
Right.
Hut texts me when they have deals.
Hmm.
Why shouldn't the weed shop be able to text me when they have deals?
I have an alert set up for new strains that are coming out that are hype strains because I like
Ex-
to know what people are excited about. And that's how I
exactly.
found out about Cheetah's Piss.
Exactly. And it's one of those things, it's like, hey, you would have never even known. You're like, huh?
It's in another state. It's complete. It's across state lines. It's in another legalized area, and it would be like a 4 hour round trip, but it'd be kind of fun, you know. But
Absolutely.
at least I know if it shows up in the dispensaries here, I know that what I'm looking out for. Although I do also need to try out this Sasquatch. That reminds me, I need to call a dude back.
the uh the 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 weed world is growing smaller day by day simply because of these two services. And what
Mhm.
I mean is, you're in a different state. You know that in the next state, they got some great cheetah piss. You know that it's there for you. They got it. You can drive over there and get it, as opposed to 2 years ago, where it was legal in that state. You could just drive over there and be like, I need a
What you got?
dispensary. Yeah,
Right?
and you know when you're driving that far, gas is going up. You
Mhm.
know, and it's one of those things where
See, I like the user I like the interface better on Weedmaps for actual location stuff.
okay,
Because I feel like it's very like googly, detailed, laid out, easy to access, gives you the information that you're looking for when you're looking for something
yes,
specific. But I do like Leafly for the same reason you said, because it has all the information that I want.
exactly. And
I
don't
kind of
get me
use them in
wrong,
conjunction with each other, really.
exactly. It's don't get me wrong. They're two different things, and
Hmm.
they're like you said, like Leafly has so much information. It's hard to kind of organize it correctly in an easy to use fashion. And
Hmm.
I think in the future, weed maps will become like that simply because they're adding more information.
They already are. They already have
Yes,
sections like just like Leafly does, and just
yes,
like Leafly is already adding in location stuff, just like Weed Maps has. Like
exactly.
they're becoming the same thing, sort of.
And that's the one of the things that allows them to both be in that space is a there's only two of them,
Hmm.
and b to a certain extent they cover the same areas, but there's areas that Weed Maps is better in as
Hmm.
far as states, and there's areas that Leafly is better in as far as states. And
Right.
what I mean is they are they interact more with different areas, so you're going to have more information on dispensaries in different areas. Like
Hmm.
when we owned our dispensaries in California, we've had Weed Maps come by the shop, and freaking when they were in California, we had Weed Maps sales rep come by them, like, how's it going? We sit back in the back, smoke a bowl, and be like, hey, blah blah blah. And then what they do is they every now and then they do a, hey, focus on this dispensary, so they could tell you who you would see at the dispensary. Now they're
Right.
so big where that would be absolutely labor intensive.
It would be insane. That'd be a lot of employees, and
Yeah,
across every single state, like not gonna happen.
but it's they've evolved as the weed market has evolved, and
Hmm.
the more normalization that you get, the farther they can push the boundaries, simply because they're putting out information to a growing population of consumers that, let's face it, people, nobody's stopping smoking weed. Okay,
Hmm.
even if you get a job, you're going to stop for a time. But as soon as whether you don't have to work at that job or you get a job that allows you to smoke weed, you're just back to weed because you just took a break.
Hmm.
It's like you call up weed and be like, hey, I think we need some space. And then you come back in a couple years like, hey, weed, I've always loved
It's that 2 a.m. What you doing text?
you. You up? Oh,
WYD.
yeah, and but all in all, I think that between Weed Maps and Leafly, both of them serve an accurate purpose. Is one better than the other? Absolutely not. But they serve different purposes for different sections of the market in the same industry. Weed Maps is basically a locational, and it's for the experienced weed user.
Hmm.
Whereas Leafly is freaking heavy on information. They also have locations, but it's for the inexperienced or new weed user, and they give you a lot more background information as far as just locations, prices, and freaking info.
Hmm. It's the information part that I really like Leafly for, just because it is so easy to consume the information that they give you and be well informed after reading it. What I
So
find
it,
interesting is with Google coming in and taking over the primary function of Weedmaps, what is the natural progression for Weedmaps? I feel like at some point, there has to be a major website that comes out and says, I am for weed tourism. Do you want to book flights? Do you want to go on cannabis cruises? Do you want to have cannabis infused bed and breakfast? Do you want to do, you know what I mean? And overseas as well. I feel like there has to be some company that's thinking of stepping up and filling this void, because that is huge with all of the legalization, especially people from other countries where it's like hard legalized.
well, I personally think the same thing. And don't quote me on this and don't make any investments. But I think a large company like Weedmaps or the dreaded Facebook, or excuse me, Meta, is going to come along and snap them up simply because weed is one
Mm.
of the fastest growing industries. It's one of the freaking one that's growing across the United States. And for all those people out there that don't like it, there's enough money in it to where,
It's going
okay,
to come into your daily life whether you approve of it or not. And in some
absolutely,
way, it's going to benefit you whether you approve of it or not.
exactly. If it doesn't help you, it's going to help the person next to you. And what
Mhm,
I mean is, let's say there's a lot of people in my area. There are a surplus of people 60 plus.
mhm.
Most of those people from that generation have been told their entire lives that weed will give them an extra gene, it'll freaking make them all crazy. But what they're finding out now is that through their own experience, that's not true.
Mhm.
And
Well,
they're
all of the research that's finally coming out that's in favor of all of the medicinal uses that are actually available. I mean, that alone is enough to convince the generation that grew up hearing that, reefer madness. Especially
exactly,
especially compared to pharmaceuticals, especially with the huge movement we have right now that's going on with anti-vax and health and veganism and,
exactly.
organic and, social impact and all the other stuff. All of the stuff that we're that is mainstream right now has to do with health, and then to have a marketed cure all that really does do a lot of different things that can be used for a lot of different purposes. When that's coming out, it's the perfect storm for creating legalization and normalization.
Well, I think personally, and I'm no expert, but I think America as a whole, I don't know about the rest of the world, they're already there, we're catching up, is going to a healthier alternative. And
Hmm.
marijuana as something that grows in the ground, and you sprinkle a couple seeds, it'll grow wild if you don't watch it. I
Yeah.
think with the normalization of that, it falls in line with that more towards healthy living push that you see America as a whole going to. Getting outside, eating healthier, having less chemicals in your food. It falls right in line with that. And I can't see how within the next 5 years a major corporation doesn't come along and say, hey, we want to buy Weedmaps or we want to buy Leafly for $88 bajillion.
And turn it into a weed tourism website, because I feel
Yes.
like that is for weed maps specifically. I feel like that is the next progression, because you're looking
Weedmaps, get at me.
because you're looking at all of the new accompanying things that are popping up besides dispensaries. Where
Yes,
there's that topic that we researched a little bit ago about how you can pair herbs with your herb to create a different experience. So we're gonna
absolutely.
we're gonna start seeing cafes with infused stuff, just like going to the bar, going out for a special fancy, Valentine's Day dinner with a whole bunch of infused food and wine. I mean, come on, like that's
Exactly.
not that's not a natural progression.
Well, because, and this is just my personal opinion, there's always people that are extra. And what I mean is, they
Glamping.
just, they just, yeah, they don't just want to smoke weed. They
Hmm.
want the finest weed in the land.
But can you imagine going to a bed and breakfast where you get to see an entire like grow operation, like you do with pineapple farms in Australia or, pineapple farms in Hawaii. It's an
Well,
actual industrial thing that's happening, but it's a perfect also addition to the experience. You're going to Hawaii, you're going to Australia, you're going to go see, this whole farming experience, like touring cheese factories in Tillamook. It's the same
absolutely.
thing. Why wouldn't you do that with cannabis? You could go to the
They're
dispensary.
doing it. They're doing it,
Exactly.
but just not in America.
But is the next logical progression for an industry like this, or for
Exactly.
Weedmaps specifically, because it's all about location. Where are you going? It makes sense to me to turn into the next big weed tourism website, because it doesn't make sense to copy what's already been done. You have to look at the next step, especially when Google's like crunching in on your territory. What are you going to do? What are you going to turn
Exactly.
into? Which
Exactly.
is why they're branching into what Leafly's doing and becoming a full place, because Leafly is going to outgrow or be better than Google as far as, people looking for information, not just
Absolutely.
location stuff, which is why Weedmaps is tacking on the information now. But that's not the next logical step in progression, because Leafly already does that really well.
Yes.
What
So,
are you going to turn into to keep going?
so let's sum up what we come up with. And what I mean is, I gotta say this again. We're not saying that one is better than the other.
Mm.
But from your standpoint, what each one serves a purpose.
Each one
Okay?
serves a purpose that's very clear and distinct on what those purposes are, just because of how the websites were originally built. But
Yes.
there is a little bit of each one on each website. And I think that it depends on which one, what your needs are, is depending on which one you're going to use. And like I said, I use both of them in conjunction. I'm not picking one over the other.
Exactly.
I will use both together as one website, because they do meet different purposes in different ways, and it's based on coverage. Just because
Exactly.
I get coverage from both where I'm at now, it doesn't mean that if I go to another state I'm going to get coverage from both the same way. It's not going to be
Exactly.
as up to date, maybe one website versus the other, just because, if it's been medical for forever, then of course established dispensaries are going to be around. But like with here in recreational, there's like at least, I want to say like 6 dispensaries that have popped up, and
Okay.
it's a very small area that I live in. There's
Yeah.
6 new businesses popping
And
up.
I think, if it wasn't regulated,
Hmm.
I think you would have it would be like Starbucks. And I think
One
personally,
on every corner.
I think I'm grateful that it's regulated, because I think when you flood the industry with something, anything, it brings the quality down because everybody's fighting to offer the cheapest price.
Right.
Just like in Oregon right now, we have probably the cheapest weed in the United States.
Mm. I wonder how Colorado's doing then.
Well, the thing is, it's because of our location and our laws,
Mm.
what they've done, and it's not we don't have more weed than Colorado, but per capita, per person, Oregon has produced literally millions of pounds of weed because we have more commercial grow operations in the state of Oregon than any other state.
Interesting.
It's absolutely weird because coming from California, where it's nothing to freaking pay 2500 for a pound of freaking good solid mid-grade weed.
Hmm.
Here I can get that same exact pound for 600, $800.
That's
Yeah,
nuts.
yeah. And at first when I moved to California, I didn't understand how people were making money, but it's because the cost of living here isn't that much.
Yeah,
So
that does
it's
make a difference.
it's relatively a little lower than the same price based on the cost of living. But the
Mm.
problem is with us having, as a state, more commercial grow areas, and I'm talking about legal commercial grow areas. I hear you out there in the comments. I don't want to hear about your cousin freaking rented 2 houses and filled them up with weed. That's not a legal grow operation. But on the books, as far as legal growers, Oregon is leading the United States in commercial grow operations, not because, it's because of the way the laws are situated. It's more accessible to the average person as far as cost.
Mm-hmm.
So whereas Colorado, it's accessible to everybody, but you got to have some dollars. It's just like, hold on, let me let this dog out.
Okay.
She got trapped in here, but it's the main thing is that uh, Colorado, the cost of living is higher. Prime example, in the state of Nevada, for a Las Vegas dispensary, you got to have a $250,000 bond to open a dispensary.
Mm.
That doesn't make it accessible to the regular people, whereas the laws in Oregon make it accessible to the regular people. It's not $50, but it's you don't need to have a $250,000 bond to start up a fucking dispensary.
I'm really curious to get into which dispensaries are being supplied by the owner slash operator and which ones are being like commercially supplied of
I can answer
here.
that question. I can answer that question.
Okay.
No dispensary can produce all of its own weed.
No, and I'm saying like here specifically where I'm at because the one that I've been going to, it is their strains that they're producing. And
Yeah,
that's why they only have a tiny selection because it was
ex-
like maybe 12 strains.
and that's the problem that they run into.
Hmm.
Uh, and I've run into this problem because I was thinking I could save money if I produce all of my own weed.
It's
It's
you would have,
impossible.
but there's that place that you were talking about that's like the bougie wine niche
Yes,
grower that you guys checked out, and that would be the same thing. You could only have limited runs if you wanted a wide variety, and then it would run out almost instantly, and then you'd have to like shut down for part of the year to be able to produce
exactly.
correctly.
Because what we did is we supplied as much of our own weed as we could.
Hmm.
It varies throughout the year, but you run into a problem. If you're growing, growers are special people.
Hmm.
And what I mean is they have a system, they have a way that they do it. And what you'll find is with each grower, you'll find, no matter the strain, you'll find a similar flavor.
Hmm.
And that similar flavor is because they're using the same nutrients. The way
Right.
to get variety into your shop is you have to get different weed in there because it's just like having a Coke machine. If Coke machines only had Coke in them, they would go out of business.
Right.
They've got to have the Sprite, the freaking Mellow Yellow. You know what I'm saying? It's still the same brand, but they've got to have a variety in there. And that's the same thing with the weed shop. And it varies. Some places they may supply 90% of their weed and they only purchase 10%. Some people only supply 10% and purchase 90%. It all
Mm.
depends on what your business plan is and what you have the manpower to do. Because all those people still have to get paid.
Right.
It takes 3 months to produce a weed plant.
Hmm.
I have to pay them 40 hours a week for 3 months before they can make me any money.
Hmm.
So that limits the amount of weed that you can grow.
Absolutely.
But yeah, but it's and summing it up, like you were saying, Weedmaps is for the experienced freaking cannabis enjoyer, if you will. I hate saying user because it makes it sound like some person strung out with a belt around their fucking arm, like, yeah, injecting. And that's, they're not injecting 10 weeds into their arm, okay? So, but if you're a new marijuana enjoyer, you check out Leafly. It has the information. It talks about strains. It'll give you the deals, everything else. It'll give you the same thing as Weedmaps with more info. If you're
Very
an
reliable information as well. There's very little in there that I've ever found that I've questioned or had to research further.
Exactly. And there's always some guy out there with fucking weed tips. They're wrong. Okay. If some guy at the club is like, yeah, let me tell you, you should add alcohol to your plants in the last 20. Hey, that guy is full of crap. Okay. There's no shortage of bad information out there. But we're telling you two places you can get uh
Reliable information.
fact-based info that's fairly up to date, and that's Weedmaps and Leafly.
And don't listen to people when they tell you only use one or the other, because it depends on what you're looking for.
Absolutely. It's like, do you want to drink beer and liquor? No. But can you if you so choose? It's but
Yeah,
yeah.
there's no point in limiting yourself.
So we're gonna wrap it up. We talked about Leafly versus Weedmaps. They're both good. They both have their strengths and weaknesses. They both have their place. Neither one of them should go out of business, but each one has a different purpose. And based on where you're at, you should check out both of them to find out which one works better for you.
Absolutely.
My name is Slizwack, and this is Rochelle T. And we've had an enjoyable time tonight. I hope you like and subscribe if you learned anything or you picked up some new information. And hey, we'll see you next time. Okay. Yeah.